Let's look at the families of those killed during July's civil unrest in Phoenix. They're not hopeful about getting justice for their loved ones. A convener of a peace committee set up by government believes reconciliation is only possible if the Indian community acknowledges the violence that was perpetrated. This was specifically towards their African neighbours. It says dozens of businesses are yet to reopen, and residents also worried about a repeat of last year's events. Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda, Ngcobo and Karinda Jagmohan are live for us from Durban tonight. Ziyanda, let me kick it off with you. Of course, we heard earlier one of the community members expressing a concern about what will happen on the 12th, on Tuesday, as the week unfolds. And it really speaks to the way in which there remains very little communication between communities and community policing structures that will give the confidence that if there's talk of further unrest, police will have a handle on it.
And it's this very concern then that is also then bringing back the conversation about just how well those racial prejudices in areas such as Phoenix have been dealt with, so that even the smallest trigger does not, catapult communities such as Phoenix into a bloodbath such as last year. And someone who is on a peace committee set up by government is Mkoli, and you are obviously in the Phoenix community, and you've said, in various interviews before that one of the only ways that there will be justice is if there's an apology from the Indian community. I mean, has that been forthcoming? But also, what other means are there to really bring the community back together, given the fact that in another interview I've just done, there's concern about what might even happen just next week on the 12th of July?
Thank you, Ziyanda. I suppose that forgiveness is critical, is one of them. But the communities, especially like from surrounding areas, they have not been conversing since after the unrest. So that can be another problematic area.
I mean, that's very concerning, because then that seems like we're getting different reports. So you're saying there hasn't been much interaction between the Indian and black communities in Phoenix in particular?
Yeah. That's the truth.
And as somebody who is living in Phoenix and is part of this committee that has been put together, what have you been doing then as a part of this committee, which consists of leaders from Kwabambai, Amawoti, Zwelisha as well? What have you been doing as leaders to come together to try and fix this?
No, in the main, Ziyanda, there have been some proposals that were proposed, but due to victims not having received any justice, and some of them have been badly hurt by what has happened. So there is that gap that victims have not received any justice, especially from government.
What does justice look like for the victims that you've spoken to? My colleague Kolim Gambi spoke to Mzondile Magwaza, who said for him justice looks like financial compensation. Others are it's an apology. What are what is your constituency telling you?
I think justice in many levels. One, from the side of government, if there were any interventions from government in terms of compensation in assisting the victims and those spirit families. So help has not come through. And at another level as well, in terms of creating like areas of social cohesion between these two communities, is another thing that has not happened.
As a black person living in Phoenix, what is it like for you? And for instance, do you know your neighbors? Do you have a good relation? You're talking about social cohesion. I'm trying to get an understanding of what it's like living in that area a year later since that unrest and those killings.
Yeah, the environment somewhere is a bit tense. Phoenix is a bit it's diverse, and it's got lots of complications to it, but underneath there is some bit of tensions that exist.
And how do you sense them or pick them up?
Yeah, it does happen that in shopping malls where you find that a majority of Africans who their malls have been torched, and then they purchase their groceries in Phoenix. So there are those tensions and narratives that says you burnt your mall, what are you doing here in Phoenix? So there's those statements that come out from time to time.
What does the government need to do outside of perhaps financial compensation to fix this? It's historical. It's been there for a long time. There's got to be a way, because poverty is still rising. Unemployment is peaking. Anything could trigger violence then, if what you're telling me is anything to go by.
Yeah, indeed. The environment that led to the unrest still exists even today, because you look at the social standing of majority African townships, they are not so developed as compared to Phoenix. So from the government side, development and provision of services, it could assist greatly as well.
Right, that's Ngcobo. He speaks for the Peace Committee, which was set up by the government. It includes leaders from various communities. He's representing the blacks in Phoenix. There's also leaders from the neighboring townships of Phoenix, Kwambamba, Zwelesha, Amawoti. So, as you've heard there, according to Myeni, the conditions and the environment which created a fertile grounding for the unrest which we saw and led to the blood in Phoenix, according to him, it still exists. Very little work has been done to resolve this, and this is in stark contrast then to Sham Maharaj, who was talking about projects, reconciliatory projects. So even the fact that there are contradicting statements is an indictment then of the current situation on the ground.
All right, and of course, with the absence of social cohesion programs, there's really very little to build on. And as far as foundations go, Karinda, Jagmohan, let me come to you then tonight. Give us perspective in terms of what you're seeing where you are and what residents are telling you about where their lives are a year on.
Well, we have been speaking to residents on the business perspective about how their businesses, if it has even recovered over the past year. Now, we earlier were in the Hillcrest area. The nearby industrial area of Westmead was looted during the July unrest, and as a result, there were major financial losses. We know the local economy lost about 50 billion rand, but of course, earlier we also hear that this number could increase to 70 billion rand as businesses are still counting the cost of the damage caused by the looting. Now, as we look back on what has happened, we've also come to one of the grocery stores in Durban, which still remains boarded off, closed completely. You can see here there were attempts to further break in. My colleague Lungelo Zungu showing you. This was a spa, both the grocery store and the liquor store of the spa that was looted during the unrest, and still you can see there is boarded up, and around the corner glass is smashed in. This has been here for the past year. It hasn't been reopened. We also hear there were attempts to also break in very recently. Now, while this spa remains closed in Hillcrest, we spoke to one of the quick spa owners, which was the only store that was opened during the time of the unrest, and he told us about how he had received death threats at that time, but then also went on to speak about how the community had gathered together to take a stand, protect the area, protect his shop that was then assisting the community by providing the necessary essential grocery items that people needed during the week, especially new mothers who needed formula for their young children. He gave us a story about how that happened. It was interesting as we speak about social cohesion. The owners of the spa, who are also community representatives in the area, spoke about how various organizations came together to protect that community and the shopping centers within, including taxi organizations that assisted to border up areas, really so the entire community could be protected from the violence that was occurring during that time. And really now speaking about moving forward, how the community has been working together, especially business owners. That is quite a plush suburb, Hillcrest, but it's surrounded by many impoverished communities as well. So now, a year on, business owners in that area have started to increase the humanitarian aid to those impoverished communities to sort of build a bridge between the impoverished communities and those plush suburbs and ensure that there is a good working relationship between the two communities. What was interesting, and we'll take a listen to the bite of that quick spa owner, but as we look at how the stores remain closed, we also think back to the time when food was scarce, was hard to come by, fuel was hard to come by, and at one point we even saw security vehicles transporting a bread truck on the N2 highway. That was the case. But take a listen to what Mike Egling, the Hillcrest Quick Spa owner, had to say about the community now working together going forward.
The Spa Group has been affected so horribly by what happened a year ago. Some of our stores within the Spa Group still haven't opened. And
that's a year later.
That's a year later. And for us, we understand that we are not an island, and unless we are constantly engaging with our communities around us, unless we are constantly involved in community outreach, upliftment of our community, education, supporting initiatives like Nick and the Hillcrest Police Station, are always involved in anything that is happening within our community, whether it be from a humanitarian relief, whether it be as small as a family that don't have food and are battling, right to everything gels together in the end. And unless we bring everybody together, what is our community without everybody participating in it?
And Leanne, in about a minute, tell us, do you fear that this would happen again? Do you feel like you would be prepared if it does?
Yeah, I think everybody fears for that, and going through it, you really just wonder how you will handle the next. But I think this time it really taught us a lesson about community. It taught us a lesson of coming together. And yeah, it was just really amazing to know that together we can do most things. And yeah, without our staff and our suppliers, it's really just put us in a different state.
Can I just add there that I think the true heroes in our situation were surprisingly the taxi industry. If it wasn't for the taxi industry and the talks that we had with Santako and our own Kwanusa Taxi Association and all of the people involved in there, thanks very much, guys. If it wasn't for you, I think our own Hillcrest community would be in a very different place.